Ba bum ba bum ba da 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 ba doom ba doo ba ba da ba ba da ba da bum ba 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 bum bum ba bum bum ba bum ba bum bum ba dum 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 woo 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 doo boo ba da ba da ba boo ba doo ba doo ba doo ba 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 da ba bum ba dum ba dum ba dum. Ba-dum, boom, ba-boom, ba-boom, boom, ba-da-ba-dum, boom. Hey, we're streaming. It happened. We're here. Today was a pretty lazy day for me. I just did nothing. I just did straight nothing. Yep. Didn't go to the gym. I went outside and I bought some food. That's the totality of what I've done today. I gotta tell you. Yeah. Everybody should do it. Everybody should do it. We should do it for weeks. We should do it for weeks and months and years. We should just do F all. We should do nothing. You know why? Because this place is lame. Because capital is lame. We should abandon it. We should not participate in the system of capital. Compton, good to see you. You're hauling trash? I'm sorry to hear that, my man. I have those days too. I've got those days coming. That's my weekend. I'm going to be hauling trash. Ouroboros snaked second. Yeah, a day late, dollar short. Good to see you, that guy. Good to see you guys. I'm not gonna lie to you guys. I'm definitely gonna So this stream is probably gonna be chill. This is probably gonna be just a chill ass stream. Where, we can start with the thing that happened that is cool for me, right? I've been streaming on Twitch for a little while now, and I have leveled up to Twitch affiliate. I haven't hit the get started button quite yet, so I haven't actually done the thing that I need to do. But there's people on the Twitch that are like, hey, John, you need to be a Twitch affiliate. I'm like, just waiting for that email. Well, they sent it. Here it is. I am now a Twitch affiliate. Bow before me. See my might, my glory. Oh, content. Literally hauling hundreds of pounds of medical waste over and over. Brutal. Brutal, my man. And let me guess, you're probably getting paid a little over minimum wage for that, right? That's usually how this goes. Yeah, take that dangerous chemical, toxic chemical. We'll pay you $1 over minimum. I know that's how it was when I was in funeral services. Yeah, go into people's homes and get their dead parents. Witness the tragedy of mortality every single day, and we'll pay you $1 over minimum. That makes sense. That's a logical thing that we are. We're a logical people. Looking to Z, good to see you. Good to see you. So, as we all saw coming, nobody didn't see this one coming. The United States Embassy in Guyana, in collaboration with the GFD Guyana, Southcom, will conduct flight operations within Guyana on December 7th. You guys found oil? We're going to liberate that oil is what we're going to do. Venezuela can't have that oil. It's our oil because we're going to liberate it. We're going to liberate it. Wow. Luckily, you get paid almost 3 times your monthly rent. Yeah, it sucks, but at least it actually is survivable. There you go, bud. Hey, barely survivable. This is what we've come to expect from capitalism. Right? Yeah, of course I called it that, guy. I'm a genius. The faster that you all realize that I am super genius smart, I can't even get through it. I was going to do a whole thing, and then I was just like, no, I can't even fucking do it. It's just so predictable. That's all. You don't have to be a super genius. It's so obvious what's going to happen, right? Oh, there's oil in the region. right? That's going to stir interest. Right now, the arrangement is such so that the U.S. empire is like on the precipice and poised to already exploit it, because Guyana is more or less a former British colony, right? So it's already kind of tied into the international community. And so Venezuela is standing up and saying, hold on a second. This territory is right beside Venezuela. We don't really give a shit what the international community has to say about, like, what the colonial powers have to say about who controls what. We should see if we can just arrange it through communication with us and Guyana to have Guyana become, or a section of Guyana become, part of Venezuela. And it looks like I've been doing a little bit of research on this, and I've been talking to a couple of people who are a little bit more on the know. I've watched a video or two. Looks like the situation is very straightforwardly. Maduro is attempting to resolve this situation diplomatically, right? That, of course, it's being reported. Venezuela's president orders creation from new state and map, including land from Guyana. Like, so they drew up a map, and they're like, this is the plan, right? And that's, big authoritarianism, right? And what it really looks like is Maduro is basically, he turned to his own people, and he said to his own people, what do you guys think about this idea? His own people said, good idea. And so then now he's turned to the international community, to Guyana especially, and has gone, hey, you come on board, right? Guyana is correctly, I'm of the opinion that Guyana should do this no matter what. Guyana is being like, what, do you think we're some kind of harlot? That we're just going to jump into bed with you simply because it's convenient for you, Maduro? How dare you? We are a country of principles. We have rights, you know? And really, Maduro will probably just, like, engage in diplomacy. The people of Guyana will engage in diplomacy, and it's likely they'll come up with some kind of deal. And I actually think it's likely that the situation is going, until the United States decides to pull the trigger and send troops in, because that's what they're going to do. And I mean, it's, again, as predictable as it gets, right? As predictable as it gets. And then Maduro will be forced to respond militarily, and then our media will report on it. Maduro invades, just like we did with Ukraine, right? Same exact story. Maduro invades, and you'll look at it and you'll be like, well, but like Guyana and Venezuela actually agreed to create like a partnership or whatever you want to call it, like an annexation or whatever. However, whatever word makes you feel good about the situation, they're going to join forces. They're going to come together. And I think they're going to do that because it makes all the sense in the world for all parties. I think it's a real win-win for everybody. That Guyana is a population of 800,000, right? Leave Guyana's honor unbesmirched. Yeah. Guyana only has a population of 800,000, right? Like, so already, like, if America wants to go in there and cause some problems, it definitely could, right? Hail Tosis, good to see you, man. Defending Exxon's interests, yeah, good luck to the U.S. military. It's mostly swamp, yeah, ain't no Abrams tanks driving through Escobedo. I mean, America will just carpet bomb it the way it always does, right? That's how it rolls. It goes in and carpet bombs the shit out of everybody. Oh, Hail Tosis, you'll be the one who will be really happy to see this. Gold star. It's me, Mario. Yeah, we did it. It happened. I just have to hit this button, and then suddenly, and I'll go down a path. Kim Young Vroom, good to see you. Yeah, it's happening. It's happening until they ban me, which, I don't know. Twitch is weird. Twitch just pulled out of Korea, right? Like, Twitch is weird. It's doing weird things. Sorry, guys, I shouldn't do that into the mic. Yeah, nice. So, popping back over to this, right? Guyana only has a population of 800,000. the like standing military for Venezuela is like 150,000. That's the standing military. They could dip into like 1 million people. Like they've got a substantial military that they could activate if they wanted to. Doesn't look like Maduro is talking that way. Doesn't look like that's how it's going. And I think that Guyana, it would be in their best interests to look to a partner who has a history of defending itself from American aggression. That would be Venezuela. And Venezuela has all the reason in the world to want to increase its resource profile, right? So I think it's a real win-win. I think that the people of Escobedo, I don't know how to pronounce this. I'm just saying it how I think it should be said. And one day I'll actually hear it because I haven't actually heard anybody say this. So one of you guys is going to spell it out phonetically for me in the chat. I know that's exactly what's going to happen. And that's what I'm hoping to see. But I do think that if these parties were left alone, that it would basically just result in a diplomatic understanding that Essequibo, yeah, there you go. I knew one of you was going to do it. Essequibo will just become part of Venezuela. It'll just be a new province. And that they have every reason to put up a huge fuss because they want to maintain as much autonomy as they can get. They don't want to sign a document that says we lose the ability to make decisions within our own borders. So, but the end result of this will, if these guys were left alone, the end result of it would be probably that Essequibo would become part of Venezuela with whatever agreement or treaty it would be required to do so. But the United States is going to invade. Like, the United States isn't going to just let that happen. They're not just going to sit there and be like, especially when you've got, like, you know, such a small population. Like, 800,000 people. It's, like, smaller than, that's, like, smaller than Winnipeg. Yeah. That's smaller than Winnipeg. Like, you think the population of Winnipeg is going to stand up against the might of the imperial power structure? Watch U.S. get influential, and by some weird alchemy, Guyana is somehow belligerent against Maduro. Not just an oil reserve for U.S., but also a military base against Venezuela. I mean, it could go that way. I mean, it could. Like, it sort of depends on who is sitting on the throne, right? And who has power and what kind of situation unfolds in that way. Like, sometimes you take a look, Zelensky is the case in point. Like, Zelensky has acted like the stupidest possible person that a person could act like. Literally elected by his people in order to draw an end to the Donbass war. And gets basically sweet-talked into continuing these wars by the U.S. empire, instead of basically just saying, hey, this is crazy. Like, you're telling me we have an out, that the out is that we go to the negotiating table and draw up a peace deal. Like, it's crazy to me that Zelensky walked away from that. Like that, and it always has been crazy to me that Zelensky walked away from that. The only justification that I can come up with, there's only really two justifications that I can think of. One is that Zelensky wanted money for himself, that he was willing to trade blood for cash. But the other one, and I think that this does play, is that he has a Nazi rifle in his back. You know, like it's tough to make choices when you've got a Nazi rifle in your back. And so, is a similar situation happening in Guyana? I have no idea. But we'll see how it plays out. The thing for us to remember, and the thing for us to continuously say, especially as this leads up to the inevitable conflict, is that Maduro is not interested in a military action. That however you want to frame this and however you want to talk about it, you're not really allowed to talk about this as if Maduro is doing something untoward or incorrect. Any nation at any time can talk to any other nation at any time and discuss terms. There's nothing. It's not a crime. It's not illegal. It's not wrong. It's not. It doesn't make Maduro authoritarian. It literally makes him the leader of a country. And because they're absolutely going to try to frame this as Maduro overstepping his bounds, or oh my God, what a terrible person for opening up talks with his neighbor about border disputes and the existence of whether or not borders matter. It's just so like it's absolutely the basics of what a nation is about and what it's for. And if Guyana says no thank you, right? If Guyana goes, nope, we're not interested in that. We're going to move forward in the world as we are, right? And then Maduro moves troops in, well, now we're having a different conversation, right? Now we're having a different conversation. So we'll see. Big looming question mark over this. Wow, I've got 8 people on Twitch right now. I'm so glad to see that people are tuning in when I'm feeling my absolute most exhausted. Eric, good to see you, my man. I find it funny that we're talking about Venezuela today because I just watched a debate between Ben Burgess and one of the main writers of FEE, and the topic of Venezuela came up, which, of course, the FEE... What's FEE, dude? I don't know what that is. Wasn't able to explain why Venezuela is socialist, but Nordic countries are not, even though they have a larger public ownership. Venezuela is, it went through a huge nationalization movement under Hugo Chavez. The Chavistas are explicitly socialist. It's, in their constitution. Yeah, but Ben Burgix, I don't actually know who Ben Burgix is. He's not leaping to the top of my mind. But I hear the name and I'm just like, yeah, sounds like a liberal. Sounds like somebody who's basically a pro-imperialist person. Yeah, if you look through the U.S. press, it's as if Maduro has already ordered the invasion. Yeah, can the U.S. handle 3 fronts? 3 fronts. Wow. You think the U.S. is only fighting on 3 fronts? You've got the Ukraine, right? Well, let's just pull up the map. Let's just do it. Map time. It's map time. Let's all look at the map. Do-do-do-do-do-do-do. Let's all look at the map. Let's 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 open the app to look at the map. Yeah. Here's the map. So, this is a front, right? Right along here. I guess it's more like that, right? The line from Russia, I guess technically, if you want to be real technical about it, it's Russia, Belarus, and then the line from Ukraine, right? And so and then in here like this. So this is a front. And this is where the main fighting is happening. So the line actually goes like that. This is where the main fighting is happening, but that's the front. And then you have this crisis going on here that they're just pouring money into, right? So you got this whole thing. And this is all in flux all the time. The United States is constantly involved in this. The Iranian border is this encircled front that the United States is constantly, they were in Afghanistan trying to push here, they're in Iraq trying to push here, they're in Syria doing all kinds of stuff. So this whole area, you can't really draw a line and be like, this is where the front is, but this is obviously still happening constantly. So 2. So 1, 2, you could probably say 3 even, because this genocide that they're funding is not free. And then there's what's going on in Southeast Asia, where they're just building military bases and forcing China to make all kinds of ridiculous decisions about how they want things to go, right? The more I learn about the situation in the Philippines, the more it really does look like the precursor to Taiwan. That China is basically having its hand forced in the Philippines over and over and over and over and over again, because they don't want the United States to build military bases here. They don't want this huge section of territory to become a United States military base, even though it already has military bases all over the place, right? So China is trying to resolve diplomatically a situation that if you look at the Philippines, you're kind of like, yeah, this is what they want to turn Taiwan into. They want to turn Taiwan into this kind of similar situation. So they can just start lobbing bombs over, right, as they do. So that's three. And then there's all the actions that are happening throughout Africa, right? Like there's no front, like there's no like military front, but they're constantly overthrowing governments here, and they're constantly doing this stuff. So actually putting troops into Guyana and actually getting in here and like starting a conflict here, oh man, wouldn't that be great? They want to turn Guyana into a new Israel, right? This is put a military base here and start doing military actions all through here. It'd be like front number 5. Right? Yeah, because the current fronts are working so well right now. Yeah, it's failing upwards. That's what their plan is. It's just fail upwards. The foundation of economic education is one of the main trickle-down economic think tanks that was created by people like Ludwig von Mises. Secondly, Ben Burgess. You know what, man? I gotta look at this guy's face because I feel like I know who this guy is, and I feel like he's actually not a liberal. That he's worse than a liberal. Ben Burgess. Let's take a look at this guy's face. Because, like, nah, this isn't the guy I thought. Who is Ben Burgess? His story behind the journey to music? I feel like it's not the same guy. Tears the size of Texas. I'm crying tears the size of Texas. Forever loving you. Probably also not the ex-Blackpool and Hull striker, right? Ben Burgess, probably not. I love it. We're finding a guy who's like the third most renowned Ben Burgess. Didn't help that I spelt it wrong. I think that's what it was. We didn't get a good spelling in the first place. He's a Marxist philosophy professor, same level as yeah, here we go. A Jacobin columnist, an adjunct philosophy professor at Rutgers University, and host of the YouTube show and podcast Give Them an Argument. He's author of several books, most recently Christopher Hitchens' What He Got Right, How He Went Wrong, and Why He Still Matters. Oh, well. If Donald Trump wins next year, don't blame the voters. Blame Joe Biden. George Santos isn't unique because he's corrupt. He's unique because he's so bad at it. I like these headlines. I mean, the Human Shield's defense of bombing Gaza's civilians is morally bankrupt. Oh, okay, cool. All right, this guy seems cool. Like, I don't know. Gamer Jam, we're under no obligation to allow war criminals, oppressors, and enemies of the people to die in peace. The masses have suffered far too much from the actions of the capitalist ruling class they represent. Manners are important in a just world. We don't live in a just world. Yeah, there's no rules anymore, dude. There's no rules anymore. Like we're not living in a sane environment anymore. Like calls for politeness, calls for manners, right? Calls for we need to at least speak with decency and all this kind of stuff, or just calls for obedience. It's just the ruling class saying that you can't be uncouth, right? That they want the genocides and the wars to be done orderly, right? They want things to be unfolded in an orderly manner, right? That they want their war criminals to be spoken of. You can criticize them, but you can't call them psychopaths, even though they obviously are. Like, this is a psychopathic death cult, like very, very obviously. So anybody that's standing around being like, well, we need to maintain decorum. Yeah, get fucked. How embarrassing, right? Well, we could just massacre unarmed civilians wherever we want, but we better say please and thank you. Yeah. Zelensky is going to Argentina to congratulate Millie. This Zelensky guy, man, like he spends so much time jet setting around the international community, right? Like it's almost like he's not actually fighting a war anymore. It's almost as like this whole conflict is just it's over basically, and he's just sort of milling about, right? Big surprise that Zelensky is going to Argentina to congratulate fucking this loser, this absolute disaster cake this country is going to collapse like downward big time. And it's going to happen so quickly. It's going to happen so fucking quickly. And what's so annoying about it is that as Argentina collapses and the whole thing gets dismantled and destroyed, the capitalists are just going to ignore it. Right? Look at Venezuela. Venezuela proves that socialism doesn't work. Ignore the sanction regime. Ignore the trade war. Ignore the actual literal CIA kidnapping of their leadership and the attempted attacks by the Marines. Ignore all of that. None of that mattered. It was socialism. Socialism did all that. Argentina is literally going to collapse under its own weight, and capitalists will be like, what a success story. See how much money those 4 guys made? Man, those 4 guys made a ton of money. Huge capitalist success. Like, straight up. They're so annoying. These capitalists are so fucking annoying. Like, that's the thing about doing this sometimes. Sometimes when I'm about to hit the record button, I'm just like, because it's just so fucking petty and annoying. Like, these people are obviously psychopaths. They've obviously detached from reality. They're living in a different strata of reality, what called the international community, where they're no longer actually connected to anything tangible and real. And they're demented enough to actually believe that, yeah, I'm rich because of me. Certainly not the slave mines I own. Like, it's just this total detached, ridiculous bullshit. Burgess went full Democrat in the force the vote times. He's not an ally. I mean, I don't know. I'm pretty forgiving of people, honestly. Like, it's what I've been saying for a while, is that I think that there is still, even amongst people who are ostensibly allies, like someone like Noam Chomsky, for example. Noam Chomsky had a vote Biden narrative that he was going on with. I think that there is like that, and I think it's just an act of total desperation that people want to believe somewhere in their heart of hearts that the electoral system will result in the ship will be able to get turned around through electoral politics. They just want to believe that, right? They just want to believe that somehow we'll vote in a party or we'll vote somebody in, and that'll turn the whole ship around. And it's just not how it's going to go. Gamer Jam, only person who can save us now is Greta Thunberg. I actually like Greta quite a bit. Like, I think that she's got some cojones, although it's kind of odd that she's walking around talking the way that she was walking around. Cat's Mouse 123 writes, you a tanky? I mean, I don't call myself a tanky, but I suspect people who don't know anything about communism would call me a tanky. So, sure. I've never really understood why people think it's an insult. Sure. I am a gigantic battleship on land. It's a very weird way of saying it, but I'm in a very weird mood. I'm in a very weird esoteric mood right now. I like that word esoteric. I'm in a very weird esoteric mood right now. So who knows? Maybe the Nazis are going to show up today and I'll actually talk to the Nazis. Last couple of days we've had a lot of Nazis in chat, so they'll eventually show up. Remember that guy yesterday? Literally. Hitler was a socialist, you know. The Nazis were socialists, you know. Womp 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 womp. This society deserves to collapse. It's gonna be hilarious when it happens. We're very dumb. We don't like to think. Na 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 na. I mean, like it's hard to it's hard to remain upset about it. Like, the education system in the United States and Canada is obviously designed to betray the very people who go through it. It's clearly designed to purge out any sense of individual thought, right? That the people who get rewarded in it are the people who are the most obedient, right? As long as you say yes, sir, you're going to do very well, right? So that you keep saying yes, sir, up until grade 12, and then that gives you the good grades so that you can go to university and continue saying yes, sir. And then that gives you the good grades until you finally end up in a profession, right, working for a capitalist. And then when they tell you you need to lay off 20% of the workforce, you go, yes, sir, because it's all you've ever done. And then they give you a bonus for doing it. So, yeah. John, don't you know the state control equals socialism? Therefore, Hitler was a socialist. Yeah, right. Forget about who owns, like, who has control of the state, who's actually operating it, right? Like, forget about who is actually funding Hitler. Forget about who like, I love the idea that literally any state control whatsoever, unless it's businesses that are doing the state control, then it's fine, right? Then that's normal. That's freedom, right? It's freedom to have giant conglomerate corporations actually controlling everything. That's freedom. You have the freedom to sell yourself to Jeff Bezos's company over here or Jeff Bezos's company over there. And if you don't like that, then there's Bill Gates' corporation over there you can sell yourself to for food and shelter that they withhold. This makes sense. We're logical people. Yeah. To me, a tanky is a Stalinist. Oh, okay. You want to get more specific. If you believe Stalin was a communist or was striving for communists, that is brainless. I mean, he was. It's fairly obvious. Like, it was, it's a distinction between what the traditional, I don't consider myself a Stalinist, like, but it's pretty obvious that Stalin was attempting to achieve some kind of form of communism. Was it the form of communism that Trotskyists wanted? Is it the form of communism that Western Marxists think communism should look like? No, but that doesn't make him any less a communist. Like, I mean, Stalin did all kinds of things during his period in power, and the people of the Soviet Union obviously liked him. Like, that's pretty obvious. This idea that Stalin was this, like, dictator tyrant that was ruling with an iron fist and all this kind of stuff is just garbage. Like, it's just garbage talk. Like, the reason why Stalin becomes the leader of the Soviet Union is because he's popular and that people like him. Right? And the reason why he continues to rule, like, he attempted to step down on 4 separate occasions, and people just wouldn't let him. And so, like, the reason why this all happens is because the people of the Soviet Union themselves believed in the project and believed in the things that he was doing. Right? That the people of the Soviet Union were like, yeah, Stalin, he's the one who's making the good decisions. Now, you can have a conversation about, because the big distinction, the big one that people often get caught on is internationalist communism, right? The permanent revolution, Trotsky's ideas, versus socialism in one state, kind of a nationalist socialism that Stalin supported. And you can kind of have a conversation between which one of those two you want to see and how you want to organize. Like, for example, what's going on in China right now has a very, like, there's a very isolationist perspective in terms culturally, that China's perspective is that culturally we're not interested in exporting communism. We're not interested in exporting our culture and our ideas and what we are to you. But we are interested in trade and we are interested in business. And so there is so there's almost a blending of those two ideas within China right now. So it's very interesting. But to simply write Stalin off, to simply say that, like, Stalin is not, like, I just don't think you're allowed to do that. I think that's just kind of a reductive way of thinking about the project of communism and how communism unfolds. Like, I've heard pretty credible arguments that say that even it's not Kafka. That's absolutely the wrong name. The guy that followed Stalin, Khrushchev. Like, I've met people who make the argument that Khrushchev was still a communist, right? That Khrushchev was still moving along communist lines and moving along Marxist lines. It's just he was against Stalin. And certainly Khrushchev is the moment when the Soviet Union begins to pivot away from the antagonistic posture against the West and begins its project of appeasement, right? But I just don't think the lines are as clean as all this. I just don't think you're allowed to stand up and say Stalin was not a communist. Well, the people of the Soviet Union thought he was. He wrote a lot about communism. He wrote a lot of stuff about Marxism. He always tried to justify his actions and justify what he was doing through the Marxist lens. And so I think you can debate about his influence on Marxism and debate about his influence on communism. But to say that he's not a communist, I just don't think that's credible. Like, of course he was. Like, he was the leader of the largest communist country, like the first communist country, and had the support of his people while doing it. So it's sort of an oddball position to take, if you ask me. Now, if you want to say I don't like his policies and I wouldn't like to see them in my own country, well, that's a whole other conversation. But I feel like a lot of the way that the West perceives Russia is pretty influenced by Trotsky and Trotsky's writings. But my general theory on politics and general idea of how politics goes is that I don't think it's a good idea to base your opinion on a project or a country based on what the loser thinks, right? Like, Trotsky and Stalin had a political contest. Trotsky lost. And so he left and then basically spent the rest of his life working against the communist project and working against the Soviet Union, crying the entire time because he lost. And I think a lot of the West has been, and the capitalists, I think, were more than happy to platform Trotsky and more than happy to listen to what Trotsky had to say about it, because he was basically whinging about the victor, right? Which creates good narratives and creates a way for people to discuss the Soviet Union without actually discussing the Soviet Union. You're just kind of discussing what the loser thinks. And I see that a lot. There's a lot of that happens in the discourse. So I don't consider myself a Stalinist, but what you're doing here to say that it's brainless to think that Stalin was a communist, I just don't think it's credible. Bread Bunny, how you doing? Yesterday you spoke about a technology about Bread Bunny. I'm going to start again. I'm having one of these days, Bread Bunny, you know? I'm having one of these days where I'm feeling just like Fubi. Is Fubi a word? Can I use that? Does that express how I'm feeling right at the moment? Fubi? Just like right? That's me inside. That the fact that I'm actually formulating words right now that have any comprehension whatsoever is to me a just an automatic response. It's not what's happening inside my brain or my body. So starting again, Bread Bunny. First of all, really good to see you, dude. Really, really good to see you. And you too, Radio. I saw you sneak in. Tanky here, yeah. Yesterday you spoke about a technology that pairs people's faces with all their mind data and also identifies the age, race, and original biogender. No one asked why they would need to identify the last of those details. Obviously, so drones can unalive trans people on sight. Yeah, I mean, that's what it's for. Yeah, you're right. That's a really solid observation, Bread Bunny. Like, why is that information even pertinent? Why do they need to know the original biogender or any of that kind of stuff? What's that all for, right? It's pretty obviously it's for it's so that you can create a ethnic cleansing policy, right? Just like a cleansing policy. That's what it's for, right? There's no reason to know that information from a security standpoint. Yeah, I saw this on TikTok too, Compton. Yeah, China has developed a material that makes things invisible. Yeah, that's stupid. We shouldn't have done that. We just shouldn't have done it. That's a bad call, right? Yeah, I might as well show this now. Like, China makes material to make things invisible. Yeah, bad call. We like it's bad enough that we have things like electricity, you know. It's bad enough that we have fire, you know. We are we're not responsible. We're not a responsible people. And so this kind of thing is going to absolutely be a total disaster. And there's no way it can't be a disaster, right? Like hold on. No, get out of here. Get out of here with this junk right here. We need the videos. The videos. We need the videos. Does this invisibility cloak work? Yeah, here we go. Quantum stealth invisibility cloak. This is from 4 years ago, to be fair. So this technology has been around for a little while. But like it seems to be catching on now. And I think it's catching on now because people have a more heightened awareness that the Western military is not to be trusted. Like it's a genocidal regime. And yeah, quantum stealth, light bending material, hyperstealth, biotech company. Right, here we go. Like, that's pretty good. Like, it's not perfect, as you can see, but this is from 4 years ago, and they're obviously working to perfect the technology. Like, how much longer until people are just have like stealth suits? How much longer until somebody's just walking around wearing an outfit that gives them this stealth invisibility quality, right? Like, perfect for espionage, perfect for that kind of stuff. Cat's Mouse writes, okay, so let's have the conversation. You know, you've caught me in the right mood, my man. Let's do it. Let's do it. Hold on, let me see if I can put up something that's... Yeah. Good news, everyone. Italy withdraws from China's new Silk Road initiative. Yeah, not drawing battle lines at all. So Cat Mouse writes, he centralized state control. That is true. I would make the argument that he centralized state control during a period of war. Right? I find it very odd that people want to have conversations about Stalin in a vacuum. That they don't seem that keen in acknowledging the reality of World War II and of the Nazis. I feel like discussing Stalin in a vacuum and not actually discussing Stalin in the position that he actually was to be odd. And I feel like people do it all the time when it comes to Stalin. I feel like it's and I'm not trying to lay any blame or accuse anybody of anything, but it just seems to be so built into the conversation that we're supposed to have a conversation about Stalin outside of the reality that there was a building Nazi war machine trundling towards him that inevitably did invade and murder 25 million citizens and burn down several cities. Like, so yes, absolutely he centralized state control. If you think that you can fight a war against the most aggressive and terrorizing capitalist army that's ever been fielded without centralized state control, I don't think you know what's going on. Like, you absolutely need to have centralized state control to confront an external threat like that. And so to say that Stalin centralized state control, it's like, yeah, he fought a huge war. Probably one of the most... No, I'm sorry. I don't know why I said the word probably. The most major land conflict that has ever happened on any soil at any time ever was fought by Stalin against Hitler. He definitely needed centralized state control to do that. And I don't know why anyone pretends otherwise. It's a very strange position to take. So already I'm a little bit like, okay, like the reality of Stalin needs to be taken into account. He was authoritarian. Authoritarian is almost a meaningless word. Like, what does it even mean? Like, he passed laws and expected them to be followed. You know, like I don't really know what you mean when you say the word authoritarian, right? Because I feel like you can apply authoritarian to almost anything. Like is Justin Trudeau authoritarian? I've definitely heard people describe him that way. Is Joe Biden authoritarian, right? Is Doug Ford authoritarian? You know, like, he has authority and he uses that authority and he passes laws and then expects those laws to be followed, and if people don't follow those laws, then he punishes people who don't follow the law. Like, it's just like, now you can have a discussion about whether or not you think that the laws they're passing have legitimacy, but this word authoritarian, it's just a buzzword that doesn't mean anything to me. So, these are historical facts. According to Marx, shouldn't one try to get socialism and then communism? Stalin hardly implemented any socialist rules because he didn't give any power to the workers. I mean, I would argue that the land reforms were a major socialist project that was an attempt to free wage slaves from a position from their owners and their landlords, right? Like, that's one thing that Stalin 100% did. And that's a major project, right? That's a major, major project. And you can't recognize a communist by what he does, not what... Yeah, you can recognize a communist by what he does, not what he says. I mean, the Soviets under Stalin are the first people into space, defeated the Nazis, the land reform projects, right? Like Lincoln frees the slaves from the Confederates, and everybody's like, Lincoln is a good man and is universally thought of. Stalin does something similar, and nobody gives a fuck at all, right? It's just not even discussed. It's sort of odd. What is not socialist about central planning? Have you read On Authority by Engels? Well, let's play nice with one another in the chat. I think that Cat's Mouse coming in with some like common stuff. I don't think we need to bicker, if you understand what I mean. Yeah, you guys are just bickering. That's fine. Like the classic infighting, right? I don't find that to be too useful, especially, like, I don't really know what your position is, Katz, but it does seem like you're sympathetic to communism, right? And you're trying to get a sense of where I stand within that communist kind of thing. And I feel like I tend to agree with the current Chinese mode of thinking, which is that every country is going to have to come to socialism and come to communism in their own way. That there is no template. There's no template. There's no boilerplate 1 + 1 = 2 way to approach this. That every country is going to have to confront their own ruling class and deal with their own ruling class, their own bourgeoisie, in their own way, through their own methods, and move forward in a way that they feel is appropriate, right? And it's going to have to be that way for every country, and I rather like that, because it means that there isn't a fundamentalism, right? That there's no fundamentalist way of viewing this, and that's more or less the problem that I have with a lot of the discourse that occurs within communist circles. Is that everybody becomes kind of a fundamentalist about it, and everybody sort of picks a guy that they like, and then they become that ist. They become a Trotskyist or a Stalinist or a Maoist, a Dengist, right? And then, of course, if you are a Maoist, then anybody who disagrees with you or has a criticism of you is that person-ist, right? As opposed to just being like, well, here's a decent argument that I think we should actually think about, and I don't necessarily think that we need to be fundamentalist about any of this, right? That I take a look at Stalin, because we are talking about Stalin, and I take a look at Stalin, and I just think that, like, here's a guy who ascends to power, and in my view, very clearly is quite sympathetic to the working class and the working people. Like, why do the land reforms? Why focus on this at all? Right? Like, why put the energy in? Why have the struggle? Why have the fight at all, if not for to help the people who are suffering under it attain a new level of freedom, right? And then the lot that he's handed, right? Here's a guy who's looking to the West and seeing fucking the Nazis, right? And I just don't think there's easy answers. I just don't think there's easy answers to be had, and so he's got to act in that way and lead his people from that position, and it's a very difficult position. I can understand that he may not have been able to implement many socialist rules during war. Haha, misspelling. Minor misspelling. Your point's invalidated. No, I'm fucking with you. It's fine. But even after the war, there was no democracy. I mean, the Soviet system was not a Westminster parliamentary democracy. That's true. But to say that it was not democratic, I think, is to misunderstand what the Soviet system actually was. That it was a democratic structure. Was it a Westminster parliamentary democracy with a Congress, a Senate, and a Supreme Court and a presidency? No, right? But it was a democratic structure. Could it have been more democratic? Yeah, and I actually think that my largest criticism of Stalin is that the project of communism, more or less, like people critique Stalin for having a cult of personality, but I don't know that he sought that out so much as it just kind of occurred that way. And like happens with many leaders, many great leaders of history, that when they die, the project that was surrounding them starts to unravel. And that, to me, is my biggest criticism of Stalin, is that he didn't really create institutions that were able to continue to pass the baton, to continue the project of communism successfully. And that the people who he was surrounded by and who took over the government after Stalin, I think were exhausted. I think that there was an exhaustion that had settled in. 25 million Russians were killed. And I think that the thing I always like to say is that the Soviets defeated the Nazis, but capitalism defeated communism in World War II. And that I think the people of Russia were exhausted, were ready to no longer be in this state of war. Were still healing from this enormous tragedy that had befallen them, and so I think we're ready for a policy of appeasement. Not universally, of course. Like when the Soviet Union fell, it didn't fall quietly. There was an internal conflict that occurred, and but if so. Would that have occurred had Stalin been more focused on creating an institution that had built into its very fabric the idea that the project of communism shall continue, right? Like the National People's Congress is. That the National People's Congress is an institution that exists expressly and explicitly to continue the project of communism, and has done so successfully from Mao until the modern era. And Ashton, I don't think you need to apologize for this. You're not the first person I've seen say this. I'd like to hear your reasoning. Khrushchev is one of my favorite Soviet leaders, probably even more than Gorbachev. I mean, I would argue that Gorbachev is no longer really Soviet, sure, but like Khrushchev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin and these guys are the ones who are creating the policy of creating the policies of appeasement, and I think that's really how we have to think about it. Right? That this deleting the narrative, like deleting the conversation between the Nazis and the communists, is a very strange thing that has happened in the discourse. And like, if you're a country that's experienced a bloodletting on that level, and you look over and here comes this organization named NATO that's forming up, and it's forming up saying, we are here to struggle against, we are a defensive alliance against the Soviet Union. And within its partnership is the former Nazi state of Germany, and many of their leaders are in fact former Nazis. That's serious. Like, it's a very serious thing that I think you have to take seriously. And I just don't think gets taken seriously by people who comment on this. Right? I can understand why he may not have been able. Sorry. He murdered people who disagreed with him. Okay, who? Like, what's their names? Like, this is sort of the funny thing that happens in this conversation, right? Is that there is, like, did Stalin kill people? Yeah, for sure. Right? He killed a lot of Nazis, for sure. He killed a lot of monarchists, for sure. He killed a lot of he killed people who tried to foment coups and rebellions. He definitely did all that. But like, anytime there's been this kind of like, in the same way that there's been this like exclusion of like, hey, the Nazis from the conversation has just been excluded completely from the way that we think about it. Well, so too have we excluded from the narrative like the realities of governing in such a chaotic period of time, right? That like like we tend to say these things in a vacuum as if there aren't like actual things going on. Like people will love to bring up the Great Terror, what we call the Great Terror. That's our name. We gave it to them, the Great Terror, right? Where oh, they rounded up people and there were trials and oh my god, it was so illegitimate and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, like high level communist officials were assassinated. Right? What's his Sergei? I can never remember this guy's last name. Sergei Kurov or something like this. Like one of Stalin's right hand men, right? Gets assassinated. Yeah, there's going to be a big situation, right? Like if not Joe Biden, but if Harris was assassinated, or any senator. Right? If Joe Manchin was assassinated, if AOC was assassinated, yeah, you would expect there to be like a major investigation. You would expect there to be like a major situation. And yet we're supposed to kind of pretend like that doesn't happen. Yeah. Every world leader killed people. If coordinating the military was part of their position, they killed people. Like, I mean, and then you ask very clearly, like, what are their names? And it's like, you just don't get names. You just move on to another subject, right? Like, that's what happens every single time. Stalin killed a bunch of people. Okay, what are their names? When? Under what circumstances? Well, he also did this. Okay. Like, there really does come a point where it's like, okay, like, I get it. You don't like Stalin. Okay. I don't know that that's legitimate. Like, and it's not very persuasive to bring stuff to the fore, and then just sort of move on, right? As if the solution to the problem is just pepper the conversation with as much criticism as possible. It gets exhausting. It just gets exhausting. Deportation of the Chechens and the English. I don't know enough about that situation to comment on it. Like, and I tend to agree with the Chinese position on Stalin. He did about 70% correct and about 30% incorrect. And there are definitely things that I think Stalin was a bit ham-handed about. Like his relationship with Trotsky alone, honestly. Like, I feel like that was pretty ham-handed. That there was a lot of machismo in that conversation, for sure, between the two of them. And things would have been better without it. Ain't it weird that Stalin killed political opponents, apparently, and so is Putin allegedly doing the same? It's almost as if Russia isn't allowed to be seen as normal. It's as if Russia has always got to be seen as some Byzantine cloak and dagger klepto state. Yeah. Meanwhile, the United States, like, what, you think the United States isn't like I think the major difference is that when the United States does its killing, it's very open about it. They're very like, yeah, we got them, USA, USA. Like Trump comes out and has like a big, we got him, we killed him, he cried, he cried like a dog, right? State capitalism only lasted during the NEP. It was nonetheless socialism since it was turned to workers' benefit. I mean, it's it's just more complicated, right? It's just a more complex situation, and certainly the situation in Russia is amongst one of the more complex ones because it's the first time it's being tried, right? First society ever even attempted under Marxist principles. B, you've got a lot of external pressure, right? The United States, Germany, like they didn't leave this place alone, you know. Oh, sorry guys, 1 second. And so I just think that we should look at Stalin with a little bit more sympathy, from a more sympathetic lens than we do. And I don't know why we should buy into the Western ideas of what Stalin, who he was, and the Western ideas. Like the West is full of shit, right? We should be trying to find alternative viewpoints and be looking into what those alternative viewpoints are. And when we hear viewpoints, we should be thinking about them from the other perspective. Because, like, I don't believe the West. Like, the West is just like, authoritarianism. Yeah, okay. Like, I don't give a shit. Like, it doesn't matter to me at all. It's like a non-word, right? Might as well just be like, dangerism, scarism. Like, who cares? You know? Like, and of course, the West wants you to think dimly of the Soviet Union. Like, of course it does. Like, why wouldn't they want? Do I have dual citizenship with the USA? No. But what about old heads? Old heads are cool. I agree with Mao on the four olds. The four olds were old ideas, old culture, old customs, and old habits. Yeah, Mao is a really interesting figure, honestly. Like, the more I learn about Mao, the more I'm like, he was exactly the right guy for the time. You know, that the people of China really needed a figure like Mao to rally underneath, because Mao represented the spirit of China, right? That before Mao and before the communists came along, China was under the thrall of foreign powers and was just basically a whore. Right, just being used by foreign powers for cheap labor and for like opium dens and shit like this, right? And then Mao comes along and is an is an anti-imperial leader, is a war general, right? And rallying his nation underneath the idea that no, we're China, goddammit. We have a history. We've got a long, ancient tradition. We've got a long, ancient way of being, and we can reclaim that. We can reclaim that. And so I think that was very popular, and a very popular idea. Yeah, homelessness and poverty equals freedom. Shelter and socialism equals tyranny. Katz writes, I'm glad we had a civil discussion. In my experience, they are always emotional and wild. Yeah, you know, man, you're going to find out pretty quickly, Katz, that when it comes to the internal conversations about communism, I try to keep things nice and level. I never demonize anybody for their position, because I understand that there's a lot, and we are influenced by a lot of different things. And fundamentally, I think we're all allies, right? Like, we're all trying to achieve the same thing. Like, you would like people to have food and shelter, right? Like, you think food and shelter for the public is probably a good idea. So do I. And so really fundamentally what we're discussing when we are starting to discuss things like Stalin and all this is, what is the most effective method of doing that? How do we most effectively achieve this goal of providing food and shelter for the society, for a state, for creating a more egalitarian society? And the very fact that we're having that discussion already means that we're allies and we're trying to achieve something together. We have different perspectives, we have different ideas. I feel this way about anarchists as well. An anarchist is a person who will say straight up, yeah, everyone should have freedom, food, shelter, like the basics of necessity of life should be built into the fabric of the society. We just disagree on a very key issue. But that's normal, I think. But we're all allies. And so if you're going to come in here and want to have a conversation about the history of communism and the history of what's going on, while pointing towards the idea that we need to improve our society to provide food and shelter for the citizens, then this is how I'm going to talk to you. If you want to see me have a wild and emotional conversation, start talking like a Nazi. You're going to find that I have very strong positions when Nazis come into the chat. So, I'm glad that yeah, we had a civil discussion. I try very hard to keep things civil amongst leftists. There's no reason to belittle anybody's position amongst leftist circles because we're all striving and reaching for the same idea, and we're trying to do the same thing. And I think we can have conversations and discussions about it without insulting one another. And I feel like we should, because that's how you actually build a real foundation, right? You build a real foundation through mutual understanding, mutual respect, and through an understanding that even though we might not agree in theory, we still agree in practice. And that matters more. June, good to see you. Little bit of news. I don't know, like people are treating this like it's like a rah-rah kind of moment, but it's something, right? It's not zero. Democrats have introduced a bill in both houses in Congress to ban hedge funds from buying and owning single-family homes. The bill would require all hedge funds to sell off all the single-family homes they own within 10 years, then prohibit them from owning any again. 10 years is a long timeline. I would prefer 1 month. That would be my timeline. And if they can't do it, then they just lose it, right? That would be my position. But you guys know me. When it comes to dealing with capitalists, I'm not very forgiving. Yeah, in 10 years, exactly. Wow. Because for sure they're not going to rally behind a party that's going to overthrow this legislation, right? They're certainly not going to, like, these hedge funds are definitely not going to fund a bunch of Republicans to go in and get rid of that legislation. The woke Democrats are using their heavy regulatory hand in order to constrict the free market, and we got to get in there and open up the free market to investors, because all that wealth will be generated and trickle back down into the public. How'd I do? Huh? I feel like that's a 10 out of 10 what I just did right there. Yeah, unity is cool, but F those anarcho-Maoists in particular. I mean, I do think that there are some things that are worth pointing out, which is that Maoists tend to hold the position that we should be in a state of war, right? That basically the distinction between what a Maoist is and a Dangist, near as I can tell, is that the Maoist says we should still be at war with capitalism, and the Dangist says, should we? Should we? And that's basically it, right? And like every single time a Maoist talks, I hear a guy who's basically like, pull out the weapons and fight to the death. Fight until you can't fight anymore. And then, like, I'm like, should you do that? Is that the way to do this? Do you think? Really? Actually? Is that the most prudent way forward? Like, it made sense under Mao. Like, but those conditions no longer exist. Right? We exist in different conditions. CH, good to see you. Gorbachev acted in good faith, but the point of communism is not to assume any good faith in capitalism. Yeah, I take that criticism to heart. I say that a lot about a lot of communists, is that because communists are coming from this position of egalitarianism and the belief that humanity can progress and all this kind of stuff, they tend to view capitalists and capitalism from that lens. That there's this sense of sort of like, oh, you guys are just making wrong decisions. Oh, you would know better if you were under a different situation. I don't hold that position, right? I think that capitalism is full of psychopaths. I think the leadership of the capitalist death cult is psychopathic. I think that they cannot be trusted. I think that you negotiate with them at your own peril, and you should do so with extraordinary awareness that you are negotiating with a ruthless psychopath who is absolutely looking to turn on you at any moment, right? And Gorbachev never had any of that. Like, Gorbachev was kind of dim-witted that way. Like, literally a Pizza Hut commercial, for God's sakes. Like, I think that he was a bit short-sighted and bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. And he didn't really understand that the true character of capital. That said, I do think that, like, it is completely possible that Khrushchev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin and all these guys could have been proven correct. That the arc of history could have actually looked at them and said, oh, these guys started a strategy of appeasement in order to integrate themselves into the West. And it worked. They got integrated into the West. And now Russia is part of the international community, which was always the goal, right? That was always like, that was what Khrushchev and like, why do you think Khrushchev stands up and renounces Stalin so thoroughly? Because Stalin is this voice of antagonism against the West, right? Just like Mao. Mao is a voice of antagonism against the West and against Western capital, right? And that the conflict of communism versus capitalism is right at the top of the mind in somebody like Stalin. And so Khrushchev starts the process of saying, like, no, we're not doing that anymore. We're not interested in that anymore. No more of that. Stop building your Nazi army. We're not interested in that. No, thank you. And if it had worked, right, it'd be very difficult to say that Khrushchev and Gorbachev and Yeltsin made bad decisions, right? If Russia had actually become integrated into the system and prevented future war against them, yeah. That's not what happened, though, right? And I think that's not what happened because I think they misunderstand the character of who of what capitalism is and how it actually operates and how the West actually is. That the West was never going to allow Russia to integrate. Like, it was just never going to happen. And Putin figured that out. Yeah, 2 years, and they also have 4 years to ditch all apartment buildings, yeah. Yes, Mao 4 olds apply. Deng was capable of multiple options, saying peace to get technology transfer. Well, I mean, the Deng's big success, near as I can tell, is that, and of course it pays to remember that, like, Deng wasn't the guy, like, being like, I know what we'll do this thing, and everybody went, oh, it sounds like a good idea, Deng, right? Like, there was always robust conversations happening, right? Deng is like the apex, the person everybody points to when it comes to the endpoint of this conversation, and it seems to me like Deng took advantage of the illiteracy of capitalists and really showed the world, frankly, that capitalists don't understand what capitalism is about, nor do they understand what communism is about. That communism has a slogan built into it called seize the means of production. And the capitalists thought that it was going to be a good idea to trade the means of production to a culture that said that. Right? Like, that to me is the major success of Deng. That he didn't have to seize the means of production from the West. He traded for it. And the success of China is showing you pretty clearly what that meant and what that means. And now the West finds itself in this position where it's having to rebuild its manufacturing base. It's having to rebuild its own means of production. And it's going to take them a long, long, long time to do so. And by the time the West actually gets to a position where they're capable of manufacturing again and having their own manufacturing base and doing all this kind of stuff, well, China's going to be like so far down the line, man. Like it's a real like the West really fucked up, and they fucked up because of their illiteracy. That to me is like the shining star of what happened. That the West, their ideology, right? We'll focus on the what my theory of the West, which is its spiritual decay, and what its ideology actually stands for. That its ideology is the worship of money, as if money is the goal, right? The worship of the self. So the person who gets the most amount of money is the king, God. That's why we care about Elon Musk, even though he's the biggest loser you've ever met. And then the worship of chaos, which is your free market. That if money is just allowed to do whatever it wants, it will ascend to the top of the hierarchy the most competent, right? That's the trifecta. That's what the ideology is about. And of course it fails. It elevates the dumbest, most illiterate, stupidest people. It turns out that the competency is just the ability to exploit other people around you. And the ability to exploit other people is not a good characteristic to have in a leader. It's just not a good idea to actually have in your leadership. And so the West is going to collapse into its own bullshit, right? Because it's got to deal with all of this. It's got to deal with this religious ideology. And while the West has been focused on this religious ideology and has been basing all of its thinking on this religious ideology, the Chinese have been thinking about things from a very scientific perspective. And that's the scientific perspective of Marxism, where they've been like, okay, the power of the nation is built into its productive capacity through the ownership of the means of production. And that allowing small private owners to own the means of production leads to antagonism within the society. That means that the society can't progress. It creates bottlenecking in production. It creates bottlenecking in its creative enterprise. It doesn't allow the society to actually progress cleanly, and creates a lot of waste. And it's very difficult to get anything done because everyone's interests are opposed to one another. And so the solution to this is to be rid of the bourgeoisie, be rid of the ownership class. Just be rid of it, and ensure that anything that exists within your society has pretty heavy worker ownership, and that the people who are doing the job actually own the enterprises and actually have a stake in what is said. So that way everybody faces in the same direction and everybody's goals are the same. And you eliminate as much as you can from the society any structure that is antagonistic, right? That the Chinese actually do look at their society in a very like water is flowing in one direction kind of a way. And if there's any moment where two things come to a loggerhead, and they actually do sit down and ask themselves, are these things coming to a loggerhead because it's structurally that way? Is it structurally the case that this group and this group are always going to come into conflict? And if that's the case, how do we remove that? How do we make it so that that conflict no longer happens and that all energy continues flowing forward? And so just the act of attempting it, I think, has given the Chinese so many benefits, and understanding where power really exists within the society, the ability to manifest and create things, the ability to design things and actually bring those things into reality. Like that's actual power, right? Another form of power is the ability to destroy. But in order to destroy, you have to first create the implements by which you bring your destruction, right? And so when Deng was talking to the West, like the West really was just like, we'll ship all our manufacturing to China and that'll reduce labor costs and that'll make more money for us. That's their entire narrative. We're going to make more money because the Chinese will make our stuff for us for cheaper. Okay. So you're going to give them the means of production, and in exchange, you're going to make a lot of paper that we invented in the first place. Okay. It's very short-sighted. Very, very, very revealing of the intrinsic lack of literacy and the stunning lack of understanding amongst Westerners of where power actually comes from, and how you actually build societies. Like, if you had a machine that created food from sand, right? You could just take sand and put it in there and it created food, fresh water, right? But you had no money. You would still have an enormous amount of power. And the Western capitalist is a person who would sell that machine for money, thinking, haha, I've got money now. Yeah. The means of production is everything. If you don't have the means of production, then all you've got is just promises. Right? And you can't build a society like that. Deng undermined West manufacturing and leapfrogged it. His strategy was a wild success, economically and militarily. That's the other part of it that I feel like, especially Maoists, don't really want to accept. Like, Mao brought a sword and had to, right? Because you had to just like clean the thing out, right? You had to get rid of these Westerners, right? But like the Vietnam War and Laos and Cambodia, the bombing campaigns along the Chinese border, the entirety of the Western society saying we need to staunch the spread of communism, like, that's serious. That's serious shit. You can't discount that. And we always do. Like, we always do. Like, imagine what it must have been like to be in China while that was happening. Imagine the stress. Like, imagine the stress of understanding that there's these dramatic wars that are happening, and that your society is this militant society that's doing everything it can to defend itself from this enormous military threat. Like, yeah. And up stands a guy that says, you know what we should do? We should make peace. Sounds like a great idea. Sounds like a fucking great idea. And yet it gets completely discounted in the discourse. We just don't discuss it. It's just not part of the discourse. That's always astounding to me. But if we can do that to Stalin with the Nazis, then for sure we can do that to the Chinese. Bush tricked Gorbachev into trusting the West, made Russia an exporter of raw materials. Deng got Clinton to trust him and made China an exporter of manufactured goods. Clearly, George H.W. Bush and Deng won. Well, I mean, I think that Gorbachev was running on a theory that Russia would be able to integrate themselves. And if they had, I think we would talk differently about Gorbachev. Like if Putin had have been the guy to drive to kind of put it in and have it all work out, but that's not the history. I don't even know who Beria is. Who's Beria and Himmler deserve Hitler's condemnation more than Stalin or Hitler. I mean, hard to not condemn Hitler, right? Like it's always weird to me that Stalin gets considered to be on the same level as Hitler. Like, yeah, it's the guy that defended himself from the Nazis that's just as bad as the Nazis, right? It's sort of always been very odd to me that seems to me to just be a result of Western propaganda. You just anytime you have a list of evil people in history, you just put Stalin on the list. And everybody just goes, Stalin killed people. Yeah, Stalin killed Nazis. That's for sure true. He also killed slavers and monarchists. Yeah, that's all very true. Like, so what's your point? Oh, you support killing people. I support killing Nazis. Beria was Stalin's Lavrov? I don't really even know who Lavrov is. Like I'm telling you guys, my brain is kind of pudding pop. Beria wasn't the head of the NKVD when most of the killing of the Great Purge happened. That was Yezhov. Beria was Stalin's fellow Georgian, NKVD chief, many power abuses that weaken the USSR and contributes to its weaknesses in 1939 to 1941. Oh my god. I don't know how much I care about learning about a guy named Beria. Like some guy in some province doing some fucked up shit somewhere. Oop. Oh yeah, I loved this one. I really love this. Billionaire says young man's workload needs to increase by 70 hours a week. The policy of shorter working hours has been discussed for some time, despite studies confirming that productive increases. Several figures, such as the German finance minister, big surprise the Germans are against it, arguing that the key to our prosperity continues to be hard work, and that never in history has a society increased its prosperity by working less. I mean, source required, but okay. Like, yeah, the key to increasing the prosperity for the citizens is to burn the citizens out. Like, this is kind of what I'm talking about, right? That from the Western perspective, making money for a small psychopathic group of psychopaths is prosperity. And for regular people to lose their own autonomy in favor of enriching this small class of people, well, that's prosperity. That's how we create prosperity for a nation. Whereas, like, if somebody were to say, "Hey, what if everybody had free time and lived comfortably and everything was cool and and there were no problems with that?" Oh, that's just laziness and that's not prosperity. So you having a life with your family and your friends where you get leisure time and you get to enjoy your life, not prosperity. Grinding away in a subsistence existence for a psychopathic billionaire is prosperity, right? He was not the only one, as Narayana Muthy, billionaire and founder of Infosys, one of India's richest men and father-in-law of British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, said that young people need to work harder. It was an Indian who said this and not a Brazilian, according to the BBC. Narayana Muthy recently called on his employees to dedicate 70 hours of their time to their employer as a patriotic duty. Like, these people are fascists, eh? Right? Labor productivity in India is one of the lowest in the world. If we don't improve our productivity at work, we won't be able to compete with countries that have made enormous progress. Our young people must say, "This is my country. I want to work 70 hours a week," added the billionaire who makes money from the exploitation of his workers. His words are in line with the recent OECD data that show that working more does not generate productivity and may just be the opposite. Does more workload mean more productivity? According to OECD figures, Germany, followed by Denmark, Norway, the Netherlands, and Sweden, are the countries that work the fewest hours per year. Specifically, in Germany, people work an average of 1,341 hours per year. Mexicans and Colombians spend more time at work, with the latter clocking an average of 2,400 hours. This represents around 1,100 hours more than a German employee. Mexico is one of the least productive countries on the list, while Northern Europe is among the most productive. Some business people and politicians agree with Muthi on social media. Sajan Jindal, chairman of the JSW group of companies, stated that 5 days a week is not what a developing country needs, while several internet users criticize the low salary at Infosys. Yeah, no shit, low salary. Like, these people are psychos, right? Like, they don't... Like, here is a case very clearly of what I'm talking about this illiteracy, right? Blue Productions on Twitch, good to see you, my man. Yeah. Like, the Halitosis, I'll get to your comments in a second. Here is a situation very clearly where we have studies and data that show if people work less, it actually increases productivity. This is for a real simple reason. Real simple, straightforward reason. Happy people who are well rested work more efficiently. Tired people who are miserable work less efficiently. And in fact, people who believe that their enterprise is working against their own interests will be anti-productive, right? They'll steal. They'll do things that work against the productivity of the company, right? They'll skim off the top. So if what we're finding is that if people think the work they do is valuable, they're well rested, and they're enjoying their life, then they'll work at it very hard. Whereas if they're exhausted and they don't think the work that they do is very valuable or being rewarded properly, then they won't. And who disagrees with the evidence, the studies that have been done? Oh, the beneficiaries, the psychopaths, right? Because one of the things that I think is really true is that the psychopaths understand that exhausting the populace is part of the job. They don't want the populace to be well rested. They don't want the populace to have time. They don't want the populace to have leisure. Because if the populace actually had those things, they would understand how badly they're getting fucked over by these psychopaths, right? And so increasing the workload to exhaust people, if that reduces productivity, well, then that's just a cost the billionaires are willing to take on, because they're getting something for it, which is an exhausted populace. An exhausted populace can't fight back. India is at much lower levels of development. Can we compare India to a peer? I mean, I don't know what changes. Like what makes it so that it changes? That because India is less developed, that means they have more energy? Yeah, so the most productive people are all-rounders. I mean, the most productive people are the people who like rest. Like, and this is something like athletes know this, right? Well, you think an athlete is like training 24/7 constantly? You think an athlete is like lifting weights 24/7, right? No, you need to rest. You need to treat yourself properly. And everybody understands that except psychos. And they have reasons for why they say that. Halitosis writes, Venezuela might be guilty of cultural appropriation. invading for oil is the domain of the invading for oil is our thing. That's right. How dare you, Venezuela? How dare you take our thing? For our position here at the Canadian Commie, my position is that Maduro is not invading. He is discussing a merger between Guyana, a section of Guyana, and Venezuela. That the whole invasion narrative is coming out of the West in order to demonize what Maduro is doing. So if Maduro does invade, then we can have that conversation, but I'm not seeing that. Yeah. Yeah, and that there's a balance to it, right? That there is a time for rest and there's a time to work, you know? And more, it's getting pretty clear that the work that we do is actually quite self-destructive, right? And this carries with it a psychological cost, right? Like if you are doing something that in which you know the outcomes are negative, right? But you're in a position where you feel you have to do it for your own survival, right? It bears more than just the physical cost of draining your energy. There's a psychological cost. You take psychic damage doing it, right? And and people are becoming more and more aware, and the zeitgeist is becoming more and more aware of the self-destructive nature of capital, and that what we are doing is actually extremely self-destructive. And I tend to believe like workaholics is a good one. I think that workaholics are like, to get into the quasi-spiritual space, one of the things I say all the time is the hardest thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. It's the most difficult thing for a person to do is to deal with themselves. And when you are dealing with yourself, it requires a lot of humility, a lot of energy, a lot of focus. And it's actually easier for people to project their emotions out into the world and to distract themselves. And one of the major ways that you can distract yourself, especially in a capitalist society that rewards this idea, is through work. That, oh, well, I'm not running away from my emotional self. I'm not running away from my own trauma and my own ideas and my own self-analysis. No. I'm a hard worker. I'm earning money and I'm a productive person. Right? And I add a lot of productivity to the situation. So I'm inherently good because I'm so productive. And I, in fact, I can judge others for not wanting to be as productive as I am. I'm so productive. I work so hard. I define myself based on my productivity, and I've defined my entire persona and who I am as a person based on how much work I do. Because to actually stop being a workaholic and to stop working for a minute and to rest for a moment and actually think and contemplate about the subject of myself will force me to deal with my own internal trauma, and I don't want to. That's too difficult. That's too hard. I think there's a lot of things that happen in this reality that are based on that principle. That people project outward, that they don't want to deal with the reality of their life and the reality of what they are and the reality of who they are and the reality of what their society is. And I actually think one of the things I've really been seeing, especially in regards to this Israeli genocide that's going on, this Palestinian genocide that's going on, I think that it's breaking people's minds. I think that there are people who cannot compute what is going on. And it is actually fracturing their consciousness somehow. It's actually causing them, it's creating a fritz in their brain where they're no longer really able to move in a rational way or in a way that acknowledges reality. Because reality has become so absurd and devastating. And to bear the knowledge that it's your taxes and it's your populace and it's your people and it's you that's doing this is too much for people. It's too much. And so you just fall into a place of magical thinking, and it fractures your mind. And you're just not able to actually move forward in a way that bears any semblance to reality at all. And I'm seeing it more and more and more. Yeah. Blue, my father works since 40 years at night shift. I see that really got used to it. But I worry about him. Yeah. I mean, if you're a person who's been forced into a situation where you have to sell your life that way, right? People do just get used to it, right? People get resigned to it. That's what it really is. That I actually listened to an interesting interview from the fellow who played Al Bundy, right? And if you haven't seen episodes of Married with Children in a moment, do yourself a favor and watch a couple episodes of Married with Children. And you're going to see like a true blue, like this is what capitalism creates. These are the people who capitalism generates. Is the people on the show Married with Children. And the fellow who played Al, Ed something, I forget his name. He actually said, yeah, I went in for an audition to play this character, and they were really struggling to cast Al Bundy, and it was because people would go in there and they would play Al as like a Jackie from the Honeymooners, and very angry, or, one of these days, and it wasn't quite what they were looking for. And so I went in there and I played it like my uncle. And my uncle was a person who was resigned to what was going on. He just was resigned to the idea that everything was going to be bad. And so he could come home and you would say to him, "Oh, hey Phil, the dog just got run over," and he would just go, "Well, what's for dinner?" And it's this sense of resignation. It's this sense that people have become resigned to the reality that things are going to be bad. And I am here doing this podcast, this cast, whatever you want to call it, in order to try to get people into the realization that we don't need to be resigned to it. That we actually can come together and say out loud, we don't need to live this way. This isn't how the society needs to be structured. We don't need to tolerate this. The promise of American exceptionalism and the American dream is obviously a farce. It's obviously not delivering on its promises, and we don't need to tolerate it. That we can restructure this thing, and we can demand a better life, not just for ourselves and not just for our children, but for people who don't exist yet. And we can say to the capitalist class, get fucking bent. Get fucking bent. We didn't accept this kind of rule when it was kings and queens. We don't accept it when it's CEOs and investors. Get fucking bent. If you're not willing to provide food and shelter to every single person in the society, then we have no reason to tolerate it. And we've got no reason to listen to this. And we don't need to be resigned to it. But it's difficult to take that perspective when you live in a hyper-individualized society that says that every single thing that happens in your life is your responsibility and no one else's. That if good things happen to you, it's because you are good, and if bad things happen to you, it's because you are bad. And that narrative has persisted and is infectious and is easy to fall into because of because of the nature of how we come into this reality. Mikhail, how you doing? I welcome the days of Bolo Bolo. I don't know what that means, but I'm right on board. I know people who cannot process that the UK and Ireland, NATO and Ukraine, Israel and Palestine, US and Taiwan are all bad and causing the whole problem. Yeah. Yeah, I used to work myself silly back in the 80s to avoid thinking, yeah. I used to say in the 90s that I did not know how to work and live at the same time. I did intense months and then took weeks off. Eventually, I just gave up on the work and recognized my whole life. Yeah. Just finished your second stream. There you go, Mikhail. There you go. Slow and steady wins the race. And soon you'll be able to take your listenership and you'll bring them in here. That's what you'll do. And we'll all come together in a powwow. They have to realize that they'd have to realize that they would get no warning. I don't know what you mean, my man. I think most workers are worried that they can be easily replaced if they get depleted. Yeah. But if you actually take a look at places like Amazon, that's actually their strategy. Amazon's strategy is to come into a region and work the employees so hard that they burn out and then just cycle through the entire labor market. There are certain markets that Amazon has actually had to pull back on this strategy because they've burnt through the entire labor market and they can't get people. Like, it's like when I say it's an evil system, I'm dead serious. Like it's a demonic system that literally looks at us like we are robots and just says, grind into it. Grind into it, baby. Get ready. We're just going to grind right into this. Get completely fucked. And I just don't know why we feel we have to tolerate it. Like, the only thing that is actually going on, right, and the thing that we should talk about, right, you have no moral or ethical or patriotic duty to serve these people, right? These people are psychopaths. They're narcissists. They were born rich. They're morons and pricks. They're beneficiaries of a failed system that's full of losers. You've got literally no incentive to listen to anything that they have to say. So why do we keep working for them? Because they are actively withholding the food and the shelter. That's what it's all about. And that's the only thing worth discussing. How do we get the food and the shelter away from these psychos? That everything else is as superfluous, or everything else is built upon that foundation. And the way that we get the food and the shelter away from these psychos is we gather en masse and we support people who are saying that they're going to do that. And that's the only thing that we can do. And the real secret to how to confront these psychos is to stop participating. Is to do as the least amount of work possible and to say to their faces outright, I refuse to work for psychos. No, I'm not working for psychopaths. Not interested. Yes, I think these people are psychopaths. No, I'm not. No, I'm not. I don't think that's hyperbolic at all. Nope. In fact, I actually think it's really strange and odd to think that it's hyperbolic. Like, these people are obviously psychopaths. Like, they're impoverishing people, they're starving people, they're outright funding genocides. Like, if that's not psychopathic, then I don't know what is. Yet, in the 1950s, with way worse technology, somehow one wage earner with no college education could support a family. Yeah, it's almost as though the system of capital is pointless. Right? It's almost as though it's absolutely the worst system possible. Yeah. You heard about Nestle letting children in Africa in cocoa fields? Yeah. Oh, what, slavery? Yeah, capitalism has never used slavery before. I've contracted with companies like that. They would complain that they've hired every convict and addict within 30 miles. Yeah. Their wages were deplorable, so balanced and healthy people wouldn't work there. Yeah. Like, and a strategy for these companies is to move into areas and just obliterate all the competition so people can't work anywhere else. Right? So that there is no other job. Like, it's I talk a lot about how the society is going to break apart, how America is going to break apart, and I tend to talk about that in terms of national borders and state borders, right? But there are going to be, and there are already other signs, like there is going to be a moment where Walmart will no longer exist, where the entity known as Walmart, the artist formerly known as Walmart, it'll change into something else, but it won't be Walmart anymore. That it won't be this big warehouse of goods because no one's going to be able to afford those goods. And the ability for Walmart to actually get goods from China to you is going to be not worth the cost for them anymore. So they'll just shut down, right? And Walmarts will shut down, and Amazons will shut down, and these companies will just shut down because they've extracted everything they can from you. And you're not going to have the ability to buy the goods that they're selling, right? And so not only is it going to be a fracturing along state lines, it's going to be all of the businesses that we have come to see as hallmarks of globalization. Walmart, Amazon. They're just going to stop existing because that's the contradiction of capital. That's the great contradiction of capital. That the goal of the capitalist class is to increase their profits as much as they possibly can. And one of the ways that they do this is by suppressing your wages. But the only way that they actually make money is by selling you goods. And the only way you have money to buy goods is through your wage. And so if they suppress your wages, you won't be able to buy the goods that they produce. And so the entire enterprise ends. And we're already seeing this. Walmarts are already closing. These stores are already closing. Organizations are already closing. And it's just going to accelerate, and it's just going to continue as the capitalists extract more and more and more wealth from us through inflation. And so not only is it going to be a collapse along like national lines or patriotic lines, it's going to be a collapse along just basic economic lines. We're just not going to have Walmarts anymore. People will stop going to McDonald's, right? It'll just be too expensive to get these goods from places because we don't actually manufacture anything or make anything. And nobody wants our dollars anymore. Like, that's going to be a real hallmark and a real, what people will say, a sign of the times. And I feel like it's going to accelerate. There's going to be an acceleration moment. So the New World Order has just started, says Blue. Well, I mean, I don't know that I would use the phrase New World Order. Like, New World Order was a very, like, George Bush kind of a phrase. That was something that the Bush administration said. We're ushering in a new world order. He yuckles. And we've seen what that new world order has done, which is, and what they were talking about is the system of global capital, right? Oh, 1 second, guys. I gotta get some water for my dog. 1 second, and then Blue, I'll explain this to you because I think that this is a new concept for you. Just 1 second. Okay, buddy, come here. You know what? Also gonna just quickly use the washroom. Deedly-dee. to understand the decline of the capitalist death cult, right? To understand the decline of the West. To understand the decline of the West, one has to understand how the world was configured post-World War II. That post-World War II, there arose... America arose as a major power because it was one of the only places that didn't get blown up in World War II. Its manufacturing and its ability to produce was untouched. And it began to create an arrangement with the entire rest of the world, which was, if you want to trade, you've got to trade on the dollar, right? And they said this to the entire world. Brazil, you would like to trade coffee with South Africa? Well, you better trade those in dollars, right? And they erected international communities and institutions in order to enforce this. This is what they're talking about when they talk about the international rules-based order. Organizations like the IMF, organizations like the World Bank. So if you want to trade, if Spain would like to trade with Venezuela, if Venezuela would like to trade with Thailand, if India wants to trade with Indonesia, well, then you better trade on the dollar. And what happened to countries that wouldn't trade on the dollar? They would get invaded and destroyed, right? And so what this created is it created a situation in which the United States could say to the rest of the world, hey, world, we want goods, we have dollars. Well, the United States just prints dollars, right? The United States just prints dollars. So it costs nothing to produce dollars. You can literally punch it into a screen. Whereas goods, you actually have to manufacture, and there's actually a cost associated with it. Yeah, and Blue, you're starting to put it together, right? I don't know what Ashan is, but they want to get rid of the dollar. Yep. And China is sort of at the center of all of this. That now we are entering a phase where the rest of the world is no longer interested in American dollars. Okay? No longer being interested in dollars means that the value of the dollar is going to plummet. It's going to pitch downward at a dramatic pace. Because the United States is going to walk around with a handful of dollars saying, who wants my dollars? And everybody's going to go, well, I don't give a shit about your dollars. I'm going to trade with China, and I'm just going to trade it in the yuan. Right? Or we'll trade in ruples or whatever. And really, countries are starting to put together that, like, well, the value of the dollar is only based on what you can buy with it. So we might as well just trade in goods, right? We might as well just say, like, okay, you're giving me this many bananas, I'll give you this much tuna, right? We'll have a trade deficit or something like that, and that's fine. We don't need to even involve currencies, even. And so the United States has built its entire economy on the idea that it's able to import goods for nothing, dollars, right? Well, that's coming to an end. That's coming to an end. The opinion of most of the world is that they don't want to see a singular reserve currency come up. Right? Most Asian countries, I guess, want their own currencies for trading. Like, yeah, China has outright explicitly said that they're not interested in replacing the dollar, right? And it's unlikely the dollar will go away. It just won't have the value that it used to have. And countries are not going to trade nothing for it, right? Countries aren't going to trade stuff like for dollars. They just want, like, dollars will become a unit of measurement, not an exchange. And especially as this continues forward. But what it means for America, right? So America's not going to be able to get goods anymore. Like, I point at something like coffee. Coffee is one that I point at, right? America does not grow a single bean of coffee. All of its coffee comes from Brazil, comes from Colombia, comes from Kenya, Ethiopia, Somalia, right? Along this band, right? The equator. That's where you can grow coffee. That's where coffee comes from. The United States does not grow any coffee. It is the number one consumer of coffee. Doesn't grow any. How does it get its coffee? It trades for dollars, right? Doesn't manufacture anything. It doesn't make anything. It doesn't produce anything, right? All it makes is war and propaganda. That's all the United States makes. And so what happens if suddenly, like, 0.1% of China thinks, man, I could go for a cup of coffee? Suddenly, a cup of coffee that used to cost you $3 is going to cost you $6. The price of coffee could skyrocket. And that's partially because demand rises elsewhere, but also the value of the currency has gone down and is going to continue to go down. So we're going to have less access to goods. It's going to be harder to get goods. We're not making them, God knows. And this is going to lead to a general decline, where the United States is not going to be able to support its adventurism any longer, as its society begins to legitimately collapse and be unable to pay its own bills. The end result of all of this, inevitably, is that the leadership of the federal government of the United States is going to have to raise taxes. They're going to have to, right? They can't continue this path, right? What if China gets coffee beans from only Vietnam and India? I mean, yeah, like, I'm just giving you an example. I'm not saying this is happening. I'm saying that it's an example to illustrate my larger point, which is that the United States is facing a major decline, and that it's no longer able to actually get goods in order to build its society up for free. That's the whole point. That it has no internal manufacturing, certainly not to the level that it requires. It doesn't actually build up its own infrastructure. It doesn't even have resources to be able to build up its own infrastructure. And because it's so used to this idea of exporting its manufacturing somewhere else, well, it's no longer going to work because the manufacturers are no longer going to accept dollars. What this is going to mean for the United States is that they're not going to be able to afford their military actions anymore. They're not going to actually be able to fund any of this anymore because they're no longer able to get goods for free. Their own tax base has been eroded so dramatically because of the income inequality that persists in the society. So there's only going to be a small handful of people that they can actually tax. So the U.S. can afford the imports just because the dollar is strong. Beyond strong. Right? Beyond strong. Right? Again, I'll restate it. And I'll try to make it as specific as I possibly can. The arrangement that the United States had with the rest of the world was that if you wanted to trade internationally at all, you had to trade on the dollar. Especially if it was oil, the petrodollar. So if you want to trade on the world market at all, you had to trade on the dollar. And the United States would take a percentage of the trade, a financial transaction tax. Yeah. And they also force client states to privatize, financialize, yet relying on the USD, deindustrialize in order to force it to stay reliant on exports, especially when in critical sectors like healthcare. Yeah, this is all true, right? That the entire system post-World War II is structured and geared to ensure that any financial activity that happens in the world is done on the dollar. That means that the US dollar is not just strong, right? That means that the US dollar is an intrinsic and necessary component to trade. That you do not get to trade coconuts, coffee, bananas, oil, rum, sugar. Pick a commodity. If you want to trade it on the international world stage, you're trading it on the dollar and the United States is getting a piece of it, whether you like it or not. And if you tried not to, the United States would send a military coup after you. No, I understand. That, and honestly, my favorite thing, Blue, to when I talk about this is that it's so fucking absurd. Like, the entire concept of everything that I'm talking about is so fucking absurd that people have a hard time believing that it's true. Like, the United States prints money from nothing. Money doesn't really exist. It's just printed by banks. It just comes out of thin air, literally. It is typed into computer screens. It is itself nothing. It's an article of faith. And the United States uses this nothing that it prints from nowhere in order to force other nations to actually give it goods. And this arrangement is coming to an end. And there's nothing the United States can do about it. That historically, when nations have attempted to trade off of the dollar, the United States has done military adventurism, military interventionism, has gone in there and fucked up their day, couped their government, all of this kind of stuff. Well, they can't do that to China. They're not going to be successful doing that to China. And China is the heart of this new push to create international trade networks through an organization that has been named BRICS, because it involves Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. That's not its official title, nor does it actually have an official title. This is all very informal agreements amongst these parties. But it represents a significant threat to American dollar hegemony. Right? The idea that all trade must be done on the United States dollar. Okay. If the dollar hegemony goes into the tank, when it goes into the tank, the United States is no longer going to be able to get goods for nothing. That they're going to have to trade goods for goods. Right? Yeah, I think post-World War II capitalism is dying because baby boomer generation is dying or don't reproduce. Yeah, I mean, there is something to that, but I actually think it's more intrinsically structural than that. That the system of capital doesn't... there are contradictions within the system of capital. That the contradictions can't be... the contradictions can't be rectified with one another, right? And we're talking about very, very straightforward contradictions. That there is an ownership class that wants more money for itself, and there is a wage earning class that wants more money for itself. And what's good for the wage earners is bad for the owners, and what's good for the owners is bad for the wage earners. So these intrinsic contradictions come to a loggerhead. And this is one of those moments where, as the United States needs to restructure its own economy, right? It needs to rebuild its manufacturing base. Because this is the best part, Blue, about all this. Is that over this period of time, right, when the United States was financializing its entire system, was creating a system of finance capital, well, the owners of major corporations looked overseas and said, wait a minute, people in China are willing to work for pennies on the dollar. And we can avoid labor regulations, and we can avoid all of these unions, and we can avoid all of that stuff. So let's just go to China. And so what did they do? They sent all of their manufacturing over to China, right? They allowed a country whose motto was seize the means of production to trade for the means of production. And the people of China made all the stuff, took in all of the dollars, bought a bunch of United States treasuries, and then used all of that in order to benefit its own people, to reduce poverty, to increase the economic power of its own country. To the degree now that America has fallen behind economically and will continue to fall behind because China has a manufacturing base and America does not. And so here's how this is going to manifest itself moving into the future, right? The United States is going to become isolated. It produces nothing, it creates nothing except war and propaganda. They're really showing their hand here in Israel. They're really showing their hand in Ukraine. They're going to continue showing their hand in places like the Philippines and Taiwan. It's going to get really obvious to anyone except Americans who still believe like USA number one, right? The United States is simply not going to be able to afford its military bases any longer. It's not going to be able to afford its military anymore because it has no tax base to actually afford these things any longer. The tax base that it has is the billionaire class, because the billionaires are the ones that have made all the wealth. So Europe will suffer the most at this point, despite, I assume that's U.S. pressure of EU. Well, the EU perspective is really interesting, right? Because the EU is sort of tied in with us at this point. But the EU, much of the EU, and many of the European states are tied in to its project of colonialism in Africa, right? That literally there was a point in European history where the European leaders sat down and basically carved Africa up on a map and then went and colonized it. And a lot of the wealth that Africa generates just goes to Europe. And so Europe likes to sit there, and capitalist simps like to say, like, but capitalist countries are so wealthy. Oh, good. Look how much wealth capitalism is generating. Yeah, by enslaving a continent, by enslaving a people. That's how capitalism has always generated its wealth, is through this process of colonization and the extraction of wealth and the importing of wealth into its own borders. And there are certain countries, France is one of those countries, that if the colonial project were to end, France doesn't make anything. Like, France doesn't do anything. Like, what's France going to do? And because of what's going on, especially in relation with China, there are a lot of these countries that are beginning to say we should get away from the colonial project. We should stop exporting our wealth to Europe. We should keep our wealth for ourselves, and we should build our own productive capacity for ourselves and for our own benefit. And the United States and Europe have lost the ability to police these places. They can't constantly put these places in a state of total destabilization any longer. They're losing the ability to do so because there are other players in the world who have attained a certain degree of power that can actually influence the world towards not just their benefit, but also the benefit for their people themselves. If the colonial projects begin to end in Europe, Europe's economies are going to plummet. Blue says, so isn't it hypocrisy if so many immigrants escape to Europe because of colonialism? I don't think that people are thinking about it philosophically, dude. I think that people are literally like, it's shitty here. People say it's better there. I'm going. I will say that the system of colonial war and colonial power makes it so that, like, we destroy a country. It's a bad place to be, and so people flee that country and they immigrate to another country, right? Like, that's pretty standard boilerplate stuff. I think it's hypocritical of us to complain about immigrants while we're destroying their countries, right? Just imagine what will be the consequences for the USA in a decade. Oh yeah, the next Trump administration is going to be crazy. You guys are writing stuff here, so I'm gonna. Money is an illusion, a technology and a social construct. Money is apparently a store of value, a unit of account, and a means of exchange. Yeah, it's basically one party saying to another, I'm good for it. That's really what it is. That it's just, we have all agreed that these shiny rocks have value. And I have the shiny rocks, so that means that I must have done something of value to get the shiny rocks. Take these shiny rocks and I'll take these goods. But the truth is that if everybody went, these shiny rocks are just shiny rocks and they have no value whatsoever and I don't trust them, give me goods, then that'd be the end of that. Right? That they're just pieces of paper and shiny rocks. They themselves have no value. That if it wasn't for the fact that you could exchange them for stuff, nobody would accept them because they don't do anything. They don't feed you. They don't clothe you. They don't shelter you, right? But they can be used in order to get that kind of thing. So they're articles of faith. It's an article of faith that says, I'll accept that, and I have faith that I'll be able to exchange it for something of equal value. And we have come to worship it in this society. We worship money. That we don't use it as a tool of exchange. We have come to see money as a god that we worship and venerate. Baked Potato writes, even here in Canada, we're not allowed to build up our productive industries and create high-value goods and services. For example, mega corporations like Starbucks can engage in high-value production that allows them to reap most of the profits for itself because it can just buy coffee beans for cheap and produce the final product and sell it through brick-and-mortar stores. While on the other hand, the coffee bean workers lose the most since they have to work for slave wages and receive next to nothing in the value chain. This is the real battle in the global south is fighting for. Yeah, absolutely. Ben writes, are you confident Trump will win? Yes. I'll tell you why. That, especially since the genocide has begun, but it was true even before the genocide. American elections are pivot on swing states. There's something like 12 to 13 swing states in the United States. Right now, Donald Trump is polling well above Biden in those swing states. That tells me that we're going to go into an election, and Donald Trump is going to when Donald Trump starts calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe, the election's over. That's the hard truth. Donald Trump is going to look at Joe Biden, and if he's smart, and Donald Trump and his crew are smart, if he's smart, he's going to wait for the debates. He's not going to do this beforehand. He's not going to burn all through that material. Right? He is going to wait until the debates, and he's going to start calling Joe Biden Genocide Joe. And instead of trying to confront Joe Biden the way that happened last time, instead of trying to confront Joe Biden, He's going to point at Joe Biden and he's going to say, this guy is a demented old man that has led this country into a genocide against a defenseless, unarmed people. And the American populace is going to go, yeah, you're right, Ben. What did I say? I said 12 to 13. Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, 6. So and in these places, Trump is polling well above Biden. Well above Biden. I think that Biden, and it really does come down to, like, it's not that people who were Biden are going to go Trump. It's that people who went Biden are not going to show up. That's the difference, right? Like people tend to misunderstand what actually happens in the election. It isn't that people go, I am thinking Biden. No, I shall go Trump. It's, I guess I'll go Biden. You know what? No, I'm just not even going to show up. And Biden's people are not going to show up, right? Like, really think about how hard they had to work to get people vote blue no matter who, right? No, but that doesn't matter, Ben. Since when does reality matter? Since when does reality matter? Like, Trump is a liar, a con man, and a grifter. Like, he doesn't give a shit about what reality is. He doesn't care about what he would actually do. That doesn't matter. It's a grift. And come on, Genocide Joe is hanging out right there. We all know how much Trump loves names. You think he's not going to call him Genocide Joe? He's absolutely going to call him Genocide Joe. And just because he also will do it doesn't mean anything. Like, Trump is a grifter, a liar, and a fraud. Like, the failure of Obama created Trump, and the failure of Biden will allow Trump to come back. You've got to look up the article, The Trump Campaign's Collusion with Israel, if you haven't seen it. Yeah, again, like, I really think you guys believe that reality matters. Reality does not matter. Not to Trump and his followers, right? Not to the kooky cult that is the Republican Party, right? There is absolutely, yeah, Mr. Muslim ban calling Biden Genocide Joe. Yes, exactly. You guys are getting hung up on the fact that it's full of contradiction, hypocrisy, and that that it's an obvious grift and an obvious fraudulent lie. Yeah. Like, yeah. So what? Like, that's been Trump's whole thing from the outset. From the beginning. Oh no, Blue, if you're still here, I had a lovely time talking to you, man. Yeah, thanks for being here, bud. Yeah, we're all learning and we're all trying to figure it out, my man. No, how wonderful. What a nice person. The more you stick around, Blue, the more you're going to realize I talk to literal Nazis. So, talking to a guy who's just like, I'm just getting into politics, and, your perspective's one I don't hear very often. Can you tell me more about what's going on? Well, what about this kind of thing? I don't know if I agree with that, John, but that's an interesting perspective. I'll take it. I'll take it all day long. You're great. Please come back. Yeah, the thing with Biden, I mean, I'm a different circumstance. I'd be hard-pressed to not defensively vote for Biden, but the Democrats are in bed with an actual genocide. I'm not signing on for that. I'll be staying home. Yeah, that's how it'll go. It won't be that the American public will rise up and vote Trump. It'll just be that people stay home. And that'll be it. And the Trump voters won't stay home. The Trump voters will be highly motivated, right? The Trump voters are going to be the Trump voters. They're going to vote for Trump, and they're going to come out and vote Trump, right? And you look at how hard people were pushing to get Biden in, right? And Biden wins by like fairly thin margins, right? And vote blue no matter who. We'll push him to the left. There's all this stuff that nobody believes anymore. You think Biden's getting pushed to the left? Do you think Biden's the greatest president since FDR? Huge FDR spending. Yeah, that's a real thing that definitely happened, right? Have a good one, Blue. So no. Like, Ben, you got to understand. The Zionists understand that he's a grifter. The Zionists understand that he's a grifter. They understand what game he's playing. Like, his backers know what he's doing, right? Like, they know that he's going to stand up there and he's going to say all this shit, and then he's going to turn around to them and be like, don't worry about it. And they're going to go, yeah, we know. Like, Trump is a fraud. Like, Trump is a fraud. And he's going to go up there and he's going to say what he needs to say in order to get power for himself. And if that means saying the genocide was wrong, and then turning around to the people who are actually supporting the genocide and saying, don't worry about it, like, we're all good, then he's going to do it. And moreover, the Zionists, who have no moral center either, who are also frauds and liars, will actually respect him for it. Like, they're not going to be like, he stood up in public and said that that genocide we were committing was wrong. Gasp and, oh, good. I cannot believe that he would say that. We're going to pull our support from Donald J. Trump. I'll tell you what. No. He's going to say it. He's going to call him Genocide Joe. He's going to nail him with Ukraine. He's going to nail him with all this shit. Right? And the Zionists will be like, yeah, good. We also are fraudulent liars who will lie for power. We respect that. Game respects game. Game respects game. And they all know. Like, why do you think they have lobby groups? They all know that this is a fucking game. They all know that electoral politics in the United States is just a form of theater. It's just a form of political drama. And they all know that Donald Trump is just trying to become the president. And they all know that he's going to say anything he's going to say in order to become the president. And they know that he's full of contradictions. And they know that he's full of bullshit because he's obviously a liar. And they're fine with it. As long as he's willing to sign the paper and do business. As long as when it comes down to it, he sends the missiles to Israel. He can say what he likes. And then when the public says, wait a minute, Donald J. Trump said that he would not do that. So how is that any different than anything else that's happened? Like, since when has reality mattered? Push Biden left. Yeah, I remember that. Vosh was a big advocate. Yeah, we all love how that worked out. We'll push Biden to the left. Little did we know that Voshites are dyslexic. Yeah, that was the thing. That was the problem. Trump has gone on record that he will arm Israel with whatever they want. Again. Trump is going to say to policy wonks and advocates and people in the room who are actually like in the know, absolutely, we're going to support Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. We're going to arm Israel. It's a terrible thing Hamas did. Right? He's absolutely going to say that to these groups, and he'll say it on record. And then he is also going to walk out on stage in front of the entire nation and say, Genocide Joe created a genocide. I would never create a genocide. I would make sure that that genocide never happened. And is it a contradiction? Is it hypocrisy? Is it bullshit? Is it a lie? Yeah. So? Like, I didn't realize that I was going to stir up such such dissension on this point. I thought that was pretty straightforward. I thought that it was pretty going to be understood. I just think it's like, I just think it's like, Annan, good to see you. I just think that you guys are like, it's too blatant. It's just too blatant. Right? I think that's where you guys are at. Like, that's got to be how you guys are thinking, right? I don't want to speak for you, obviously, but it's got to be how you guys are thinking, right? That you're sitting there thinking to yourself, there's absolutely no way that Donald Trump is going to say on the public record, in front of cameras, in front of people, I support Israel. Israel has the right to defend itself. We're going to weaponize and send money to Israel. I'm going to sign this paper and all of that, and then turn around during a debate and say that the genocide was bad and put it on Biden's shoulders. There's no way he's going to do that, right? He's absolutely going to do that. He's absolutely going to do that. For sure, 100%. Because the mass of the people are not like wonks like we are. Like, we're looking at the news every single day and we're parsing through, and then we're having discussions about it, and then we're sitting here and we're having a big thing about it, and we're trying to figure out what's real and what's not, and actually trying to be in the know and build like a knowledge base and actually defend positions and all of this kind of stuff. Most Americans are literally like, did you see what Kim Kardashian wore today? Oh, I loved it. She broke the internet. That's so great, amazing. Oh my goodness. Did you hear what Donald Trump said? Oh my God. Right? So it doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. Like, 100,000 people saw that he said he was supporting Israel. 200 million will see that he calls Joe Biden Genocide Joe. And when he does it, that'll be on TikTok, that'll be on Instagram, that'll be on the feeds. It'll just cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle and cycle. And we will stand here and be like, yeah, but that's bullshit, right? Here's the article of him like literally saying that it's it's complete and total bullshit. So we'll have a penetration of what, like 10,000 people? 200 million, Genocide Joe, Genocide Joe, Genocide Joe, Genocide Joe, 10,000 people. It's nonsense, right? Like, how do you think it's going to go? But I'm with you guys, man. I'm absolutely with you. Like, it's crazy. You make Trump sound like someone who will say he supports whatever is popular. I don't think that's how he operates. Oh, well. He panders to a specific audience, not the general public at large. Ben, I just think you're wrong. Like, I just think you're wrong. I think that Donald Trump is going to say anything to anyone if he thinks it's going to gain him any power at all. Like, at all. Like, I don't think he has a moral compass. You know what I mean? Like, I don't think he has principles. I think that he will say one thing to one person if it thinks he will garner him influence, and then he'll say the opposite to another person if he thinks it'll garner him influence. Like, that's all. Hussein did a clip of me and then said, "You're so wrong here." No, he has to play to his base. But his base is anti-war. And they are anti-war. They're against the Ukraine war. The whole Genocide Joe angle, I think, is going to play really nicely. Right? Hey, I'm happy to be wrong on this one. His base is Israel first. Oh, this is a fair argument, actually. His base is Israel first. But his base is also, like, loaded with people who, like, understand that the commander in chief needs to say some stuff to get power. You know? Guys, I'm telling you, Genocide Joe is coming out of Donald Trump's mouth. I just don't know how he could resist it. That's the thing. I just don't know how he can resist it. It's right there. It's got the alliteration, you know? I just feel like he can't not do it. and that the Zionists and his base will completely understand. They'll be totally on board. Like they won't care that it's like a contradiction. They won't care that it's a lie. Crooked Joe, Sleepy Joe has played. Ukraine War Joe. You got to do better than Ukraine War Joe. That doesn't roll off the tongue. You got to like Yuki Joe. Right? You've heard of GI Joe. Well, here's UK Joe. Yuki Joe. Look, we're just spitballing here. Trump also said he wanted to leave NATO, but his so-called general didn't want him to. Great popular culture point on Kim Kardashian. Popular culture is indeed the gateway to tyranny. Consider democracy to dictatorship. Popular culture is a stepping stone to dictatorship. I think it's important to follow the politics if we're looking to seize opportunities, but without a critical mass of organization, it's a waste of time. Yeah. Which is why you got to talk to your neighbors, right? We're actually going in, like, we've got to take a look at the benefits of what's about to happen, right? Is that a lot of the bullshit, a lot of the fabrications of the capitalist era are falling apart. And the rise of this fascist right is the rise of this fascist right is really giving lie to what a lot of the liberals stand for. And especially this genocide gives a rise to the lie of a lot of this stuff, of the liberal class. And so we actually have the opportunity to actually organize and say to people, like, this is fucking not working, eh? And to begin organizing to the left. Which, that's what I say that we should be doing. We should be building left organizations that are explicitly anti-capitalist and telling people to abandon the traditional parties. Like, don't vote conservative, liberal, NDP. Don't vote Republican conservative, right? Don't vote Republican Democrat, right? Support candidate, only support people and only support candidates and only support institutions that say in their constitution, in their charter, we are an anti-capitalist organization, explicitly. And if they refuse, if they won't say the word nationalization, if they won't say the word socialism, if they won't say the word, if they won't say any leftist rhetoric at all and any anti-capitalist rhetoric at all, abandon them and tell them that. Like, we don't need these frauds. We're not interested. Like, I don't know why anybody would be voting for liberals or conservatives or NDP at this point, outside of this sort of delusional belief that the system is somehow going to reform itself and is going to work. No, I think my Twitch chat has frozen. I noticed that Twitch likes to freeze. The left-right rhetoric is a binary fallacy. Yeah, it's a useful shorthand, but you're right. Like, it should be a owner worker. That should be the way it works. Yeah. I wish I was only focused on popular culture and never cared about present political situations, only about philosophy, theory, and history. Yeah. That in a society that's running, like, well, nobody needs to focus on the political situation because one hopes that the political situation would be in hand. Ben says, I think it's completely inconceivable that a candidate of either party within the imperialist war machine could ever come out with a pro-Palestinian stance. You know what? We'll see. Let's make a bet. Let's make a bet. Not a real bet, obviously. But like I think that we've like stated our cases and that we're only going to go in circles from here. But I'll tell you, Ben, and here's my thing, okay? Here's my thing. So now we're not talking about whether Trump wins or not. Okay? I think Trump wins. And I'm still going to think that. Now we're talking a very specific thing. Donald Trump is going to say the words Genocide Joe at the debates. That's what I think is going to happen. He's going to say the words Genocide Joe. That's it. No further anything. Genocide Joe at the debates. And there we go. You can clip this. And then when it doesn't happen, you can make fun of me as much as you want. And then whenever I make another claim, you can be like Genocide Joe at the debates, eh, John? And I'll be like, fucking Ben. Sound good? Hey, CH, there is no evidence to show that Vaush is a CIA stooge. He's an FBI stooge. That's different. So he's an FBI snitch and informant, not a CIA stooge, near as we can tell. Vooch, Fiddleford, good to see you. Trump will say Genocide Joe. He can't help himself. Zionists will flip, but Trump can't help himself. Yeah. Ben says, okay, but you only win if he says it in reference to Israel's action in Gaza, not some other situation. No. No. My statement is that he will only say the words Genocide Joe. No reference to anything else. He only says the words Genocide Joe. Yeah, if Trump says it at all, it has the same effect. Everybody knows what's happening. Yeah, no. He will say the words Genocide Joe at the debates. That's what I'm saying. And you tacking on this other thing that says, oh, but it has to be in reference to... No. But the thing is, Ben, is that like if he says Genocide Joe, people who are in the know are going to know what he's saying, right? Like he's not going to say Genocide Joe and people are going to think of like something else. Like we all know where the genocide is. And then he'll do damage control afterwards. Be like, well, no, I was talking about Ukraine and I was talking about that. So I reject your amendment. My statement is and has always been and will continue and will remain. He'll say the words Genocide Joe at the debate. And when it happens, I'll go sick. And when it doesn't happen, I'll be like, nah. We're going to make the stakes as high as possible. As high as possible. Man. What a ridiculous time. What a ridiculous time. Yeah, he'll call him Genocide Joe, and he'll also say he's the most pro-Zionist president in the history of the United States. That's right. He'll definitely be like, I support the people of Israel, not like Genocide Joe. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. Truth is, the U.S. is usually involved in some way if a genocide is occurring. It's true. Like, oh, man. No, but taking it back to, like, we got off the rails a little bit there. Taking it back to the original point, I do think that Trump is going to win. I think that Biden's support was always threadbare and conditional. That Biden's support was sort of based on the idea that he'll pass some legislation and he'll do some stuff. And we're seeing pretty clearly that that is false. That's not the case. And I think, like, people will point out all the time that, Muslims are going to not vote for Joe Biden, but Donald Trump has a Muslim ban. And it's like, I can see their perspective of being like, yeah, like, deportation versus, like, a genocide, you know? Like, if the argument is it's about the lesser of two evils, well, then Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils, right? Like, when you compare the legacy of Donald Trump and you compare the legacy of Joe Biden and you put them side by side, Donald Trump is the lesser of two evils. And so if that's your argument, well, there it is. And moreover, interestingly, I don't think it'll be close. I really do think that, like, Trump is going to walk away with it. Because I just think that Biden has really, like, he's betrayed essentially everyone, right? Like, except the small group of corporatists. There's this, like, small, tiny group of corporatists that are like, Joe Biden is great. He loves diversity, right? But, like, if you're a climate change person, Joe Biden said fuck you. If you're an anti-war person, Joe Biden said fuck you. If you're, like, workers' rights and all this kind of stuff, Joe Biden said fuck you. Like, literally the guy is walking around being like, I have no sympathy for young people these days. Like, it's pretty tough. It's pretty tough to actually, like, believe that Joe Biden is going to pull it out. Moreover, I'm like, I just don't think he should run, man. Like, the guy's old. Like, he's super old. Like, he looks old. He seems really, really old. And just, I just think the best shot that the Democrats have is if he stepped down and somebody else stepped in. But they don't really have anybody. There isn't anybody that really resonates in a big way with the American people, you know? And I feel like the American people are pretty much over it. Like, they don't really trust the corporate system and the corporate news cycle anymore. So if suddenly, like, the Democrats are pushing forward some new person, being like, here's Pete Buttigieg or whatever, people aren't going to be like, oh, wow, the corporations are saying Pete Buttigieg. Newsom, yeah. It's just like Bernard Sanderski, but they'll never give him the nomination. Well, whatever. Bernie Sanders is pro-genocide too. Like, what changes that? Like, Bernie had his moment, but I think his moment has come and gone. Like, the sobering reality, right, is that no matter what happens there, the conflicts throughout the world will continue. Because that's the policy of the United States. And that whether it's Trump that's elected or Biden that's elected, that's the policy that's going to continue. Biden is delusional. He said he wouldn't be running if Trump wasn't also. If it's so important to beat Trump, he should acknowledge he's a burden for his party. Yeah. I honestly, like, you guys know my position on this. I just don't think it matters that much that Trump, Biden, like, the way that the momentum is going on the world stage, I just don't think whether it's one group or another group, they're going to have the big impact and the big effect. Especially because, like the question is, in my view, kind of internally. Like, the United States is not achieving its war goals. It's not having success in the world. Certainly not the success it used to have. It is losing control of Africa. It is losing control of Latin America. It is losing control of the Middle East. It's losing control. It's no longer able to support these tin pot dictatorships like it used to be able to do. Like the idea that Iran still stands, the idea that these places like the world is moving away from America and is isolating America, and that's going to happen no matter who is in power. So the question really is only how is it going to affect the domestic population? That's really the only question. Yeah, Myanmar, all I really know about Myanmar is that there was a coup there, and now I believe it's here. They did some kind of ethnic cleansing, and now there's people here who have been pushed out. Yeah. Africa's already lost. Like yeah, there's too little too late. Like it's like $1 late. My friend was so mad at me when he found out I voted communist instead of NDP. Yeah. Well, you want to vote for something that you believe in, right? Like, I don't believe in this NDP. Like, I think that they're a graveyard for leftists. That's what I think they're there for. That if, like, does everybody remember what happened when Obama came into power? I'll never forget this. Like, when Obama came into power, I remember me and everybody around me was like watching the inauguration, and there was this sense of like something important is happening. And I think culturally something important was happening. Culturally. The first black American president. It's not nothing, right? Culturally. It's not nothing. But I will never forget that Obama, who had the White House, who had the Congress, and had the Senate in super majorities, literally paused what he was doing and held a meeting with the Republicans to have a conversation with them about how, so that he could reach across the aisle and talk. And all they said to him was, I think we've got to scrap it and start all over, is the only thing they actually said to him. And I remember thinking then, this whole thing is a farce. That any actual person in any actual position of power would have understood, oh, we've got a major mandate here. We're just going to push through a bunch of legislation. We have 2 years to do whatever we want, and we're going to. But instead of that, Obama's first 2 years were just him dickering around. And the legislation that he actually did pass, like Obamacare, like, who gives a fuck? Yeah, had he moved faster on healthcare while Ted Kennedy was alive, he'd have universal healthcare. No, but I mean, he didn't want it. Because he was always just a thrall of capital. Yeah, NDP is structured not to win. Provincial parties control the federal. Yeah, it is a fascist dictatorship in Myanmar. I think maybe they tried a Marxist approach that was socialist but anti-communist. Sorry, like, yeah, a Marxist approach that was anti-Marxist. This is why this Nas bullshit's never going to work. Right? Because it's just incompatible. They just don't work. Yeah, China has essentially broken the U.S. dominance of implementing sanctions. Yeah, BRICS is the final nail in the coffin. That's why they're so unhinged about China. Yeah. Yeah. People idolize Jack Layton just because he took the NDP to second place in 2011. I don't get it. He wasn't all that. Yeah. Oh, marketing. Marketing counts. Obama did have a... yeah. Obamacare was Romney care. It was the right-wing solution. Yeah, exactly. And we're all supposed to, like, buy into this. We're all supposed to be like, oh, yeah, Obama, great president. Okay, guys. We've reached the end. I think I'm going to call it. I hope you guys have a really good weekend, right? Make sure you do something lovely for yourself. Get out to the beach, stare at the sky, right? Smoke a doob. Do whatever you need to do to feel good about yourself and to feel nice about yourself. Always remember, each and every one of you is a quantum being walking around in quantum energy. These billionaires are spending hundreds of billions of dollars in the hopes you'll never realize it. You'll just stay the good little commodity they need you to be. Rebel. Revolt. Repent. Good luck. We're going to need it.